Hey everyone. It's really awesome to be here. I actually lived in London last year, and it's super awesome to be back. It's such a vibrant city, and especially coming back to just meet such a creative crowd of people, it's really nice. I was at an airport recently, not too long ago, and I was kind of in my own headspace thinking about my mom's 70th birthday. She's kind of turning quite old and needs a big party. But there was this young family coming in, rushing. They had kids, bags, and just stuff flying around. And they were like, where are we going? What are we going to do with all our stuff? They're going to, fly somewhere with a lot of stuff. So they actually saw me, and they came up and like, hey, can you help us? And I was kind of like, whoa, what's going on? So I had to kind of switch context. I looked at their printouts and kind of trying to figure out where they're going. Flight, desk, gate, bag drop, all of those kind of things. And I think it worked out. I think they actually made it in time. But kind of reflecting on that afterwards, I was thinking, all of the information that they needed was right there, all over the place. But it was hidden among all this information that everyone else needed. So I figured there must be something that we can do to aid those situations in the future, and AR is super awesome for that. But we're not there yet. But my name is David Mondelore, and I'm a creative engineer at SVRVIVE Studios. That's a little startup in Stockholm doing immersive experiences, and it's good fun. I will be, do I have a clicker actually? Is this a clicker? All right, awesome. So, yeah, that's that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about something that I loosely call integrated VR, or AR, sorry. And that's kind of, because I don't really know exactly what to call it. And it's kind of stemming from the fact that a lot of people now are super excited about the latest headgear. I was fortunate to work on the HoloLens and doing prototypes before it was announced, so that was way back in the days. And I've been passionate about AR for such a long time, and seeing that magic was really like, wow, this is amazing. But what kind of struck me was the whole thing about the field of view, the input, and so on. And I was in the hotel room, and I kind of had to go back to square one, and like, you can't really do the things we want to do. We have to actually design the experience around the limitations of the technology. And I kind of feel that we're doing a little bit the same now with these new AR capabilities we have. Everyone's got it in our pocket. We can do whatever we want. But it's kind of like I'm sitting in the studio at home and thinking about what can we do on a tabletop. We don't really know what tabletop it is. We don't know where in the world it is, and so on. And that's going to get better. Eventually we'll have walls and curved surfaces and all kinds of stuff. But it's still, we're looking for the killer app of AR, given what we kind of have today. So I just want to, among all the feeds of, wow, this is the latest headset, this is the latest this and that technology, just kind of come back a little bit to thinking about what we want to do and why we want to do it, so that all of us can help push the industry in the right direction and ask for the right technology and ask for the right services. So kind of capturing that a little bit is, I'm interested in rich and meaningful AR that is deeply integrated into the real world. And that's a big ask, obviously. That's, not an easy thing to get to. That's kind of what we all want to get to eventually, right? But it's easy to kind of get sidetracked. Oh, I have to build something right here on this table, but it might be the table over there. And obviously, why? Because we don't want to miss our flights. But obviously, tech is important. Tracking is super key to all of these things. So I'm just going to touch really quick on that. But this is not a talk about tech, tracking tech. That's a whole talk in itself. There's so many cool things. I'm an engineer, so I love talking about tech and tracking and stuff. But I'm just going to do a really, really quick recap to kind of look at where we are today with the things that we've got kind of in our pockets primarily. So we've got location triangulation, and that's kind of the GPS, cell towers, Wi-Fi, using the signal of the towers to triangulate where you are. And it's really nice. It's absolute. It's persistent. If I stand here today and get my location and come back tomorrow, I'll kind of get the same result given the accuracy of the device, of the surroundings. But it's not very accurate. It's definitely not pixel perfect. And then we have SLAM, which is super popular right now. We have ARKit, ARCore, and so on. And they are, it's coming from robotics, where kind of robots are dropped into unknown environments, and they kind of need to figure out where they are and what the environment looks like at the same time. But they're mostly vision-based. Obviously, they're kind of fused with other sensing capabilities, but because they're vision-based, they're pixel perfect. They're using the pixels to figure out what they're looking at. And they're markerless, which is really cool. You can drop them in kind of anywhere. You don't have to mark the space up, and they'll kind of figure out what the space looks like and where they are eventually. But right now, especially what we have in the pocket with these new capabilities, it's very isolated and transient sessions. The map that I generated yesterday, on my table, is not going to be available the next day when I look at the same table even, or something close by. And also, the maps that I create can't be used for tracking with my friend over there, so we can have a shared experience or see the same kind of content. And then we have object and image tracking, which is getting cooler and cooler as well. You see these kind of things quite often, where we're using images to kind of find out where the camera is in relation to some content. We're also starting to see solutions that can track objects that are not flat, and we can really pinpoint, kind of pixel perfect, where these objects are in the real world and add virtual content to them. And it's kind of semi-persistent because the objects that we're tracking are physical and they're persisting, so we can kind of come back to it and have a continued session there. But like I said, this is not a talk about tracking tech, so let's just imagine that tracking has been solved. Let's look a little bit forward and see what we want to do with it, and what kind of tracking, what kind of solutions would we like to have. Imagine that you have a device that knows exactly where it's looking in the real world, and with super awesome precision, excellent precision. The question is still then, what would we do with it? What kind of experience would we want to have? What kind of experience would people like us want to create? And there's a bunch of things that I kind of listed, and I'll just go through them one by one. But the first important one that I think is experiences that are precise and absolute. And that's kind of a little bit of all of these different tracking techs potentially. But I want AR content to extend physical objects and spaces. I want to be able to add stuff here, knows exactly where it is, and it's there tomorrow. I want to have something in this room, and it stays in the room, and it's kind of precisely, where I put it. And it doesn't drift. Like, you have GPS location-based services. They are kind of there, but not, exactly there. And yeah, that's kind of precision that would be nice to have, right? And obviously persistent and shared. We want the maps, the mapping, the tracking data, and the content to persist across sessions. And we also want to be able to share them with our friends and others. And back to the family at the airport and various other situations. We want content to be meaningful, and we want to be able to discover content, especially if it's out in the world and not just at home where we don't know what it is. And we also want to see only the content that we care about, and when we care about it. We don't want to see everything else just because other people need it right now. So with digital content, we have the luxury of doing very personal and contextual and more meaningful experiences. Another thing is when we come to, later on, when we have perfect tracking, we can kind of put stuff, in the real world, and it sits there. Obviously, anyone will be able to put any kind of content anywhere. So it's going to be a lot of stuff. It kind of draws parallels back to when we had the early browser, internet browsing experiences, where you had abusive pop-ups and all kinds of stuff just coming up all the time and trying to grab your attention. Hey, I'm here. Look at me, click on me, and do stuff. So we don't want that. That's not personal and contextual necessarily, and definitely not meaningful all the time. And also the fact that it's digital, we can have many different types of content or many different things occupying the same physical space. So where you're looking right now is not enough to differentiate what you're actually interested in necessarily. We need other ways to tell. And obviously this is kind of taken for granted, dynamic and interactive. It's a digital experience, so we can change the content on a whim. We can make it interactive, clickable, grabbable, whatever. We want them to be responsive, the experiences. We want the content to be smart and see the stuff that makes the most sense to us and kind of predict what we're doing. So just to summarize that a bit, we have these nice little words, wishful thinking, but if we look at all of these things kind of outside of the context of AR, we actually have most of these features already, but they're all spread out in separate, different experiences. What we don't have is all of them coming together in an integrated AR experience. And that comes back to, this is what we want, or at least what I want. And that's rich and meaningful AR that is deeply integrated into the real world so that we don't miss our flights. And that's kind of why I kind of just added a word to this thing to make it one word rather than this long description and many slides. Just calling it integrated AR, so to have something to kind of remember what does that mean, and then kind of looking at these things. So all of us kind of just remembering that what do we want to do with AR and what is actually meaningful in going forward. When we're looking for the killer app, should we just focus on what we can do on the table? Yes, we should probably to begin with, but we also want to push the industry and push service providers and ask tech solutions or tech providers for what we actually want to do to make meaningful everyday lives. Just going a little bit deeper into that, context and discovery. If we want to think about how you would manage all of this stuff, how can I make sure that I see the content that I want? Dedicated applications, obviously, they're great for context. You can have an application that is just about that thing, and it will deal only with that specific content, kind of like just a Unity app that has its own protocol for content. And also, you can just for free multitask or kind of manage the content just like you manage your applications in the phone. But then obviously, it would be super awesome to have generic search. Think Google Search or Google Maps and so on, where you're kind of giving context by your search filter or what you're interested in right now. So it's great for discovery and kind of finding new things. I'm here. I'm looking at these things. What do I have to play with? Or I want to find all of these things kind of around me. What do I have then? So I can kind of give it as much context as I want. But obviously a lot more difficult because there has to be a standardized protocol for the content. I'm just chucking in HTML6 there. You'd also need to multitask and manage content in a different way than separate applications. Maybe web pages, you can do that on the phone, but how do you do that when it's actually in the 3D space around you? How do you close that experience or that content over there, and so on. And then more things to add context and discovery, subscriptions, trusted providers. You have your feeds and your streams for today, and you have your personal preferences. You have AI that scrapes all of the stuff you're interested in and shows you what you want. Recommendations between friends, and then, oh, something is close by that I'm interested in, notifications. When it comes to creating this content, people like us, maybe, developers and so on, have to change a little bit how we're operating. If we actually have this magical thing that knows exactly where it's looking, it kind of also needs to be fed what should be there and where am I and all those kind of things. So we need to map physical objects and spaces somehow. I'll come back to mapping soon. We need to create the content that should sit in that place, in that space, on that object. And we need to place, or specifically, or more importantly, tag the content as well so that people can discover it and find it. So it ends up in the right stream or in the right search filter. And obviously, new teams and new skills. A lot of these skills already, these kind of jobs already exist, but they will come together in different ways that we haven't really seen so much of before. You need someone who knows about spaces and people flowing and movement through spaces, ergonomics and information design when I'm in the airport. What is important for me to see when I'm seeing it and not have to share that physical space, that information space with everyone else. If I can interact with it, how do you make things interactable when they're actually in the physical world? They're not buttons on a screen anymore, they're actual kind of objects, and the readability of what's interactable and so on. And obviously, software engineering, you actually need to actually implement everything as well. So mapping. This is kind of already happening, and it's a big part of tracking. And tracking is key to this, but it shouldn't be necessarily just the driver. Big companies, they have dedicated resources to have dedicated services. Something like indexing the world comes to mind. Obviously, when there's a lot of cameras, a lot of scanners moving around in the world, it would be awesome to tap into that and crowdsource the building of all of this information, where I am, what I'm looking at, and actually feed that back later on when I want to find out where I am again, or where someone else is. And this, just like Street View or whatever, or maps in general, progressive. It's going to be progressive. We're not going to have all of that from day one everywhere. It's going to be in the hotspots first, and it's going to be not as rich. And then also mapping when you have weather, day cycle, and so on. All of a sudden there's snow and everything looks different, and a big part of tracking is the visual component. So what do you do when the pixels look different, and how do you cater for that? So that's it really. I'm super excited about all this, but tech experiences need to kind of keep a good balance. It's a good time to be alive, really.